an order. So something is done in order. There is an order, and you got the instruction also what we are going to do tonight together, Passover Seder, so Passover order, and we are going to have like 19 steps. It's sometimes the Jewish tradition says that there are like 14 steps. We do it a little bit more extended, but we're going to cover all the steps tonight. So we're going to fulfill the entire order. And at the end of the ceremony, I will probably keep in mind to tell you something what is usually at the end of the Passover Agada or story or Seder is, so blessed or happy is the one who fulfill all the steps, the entire order of the ceremony, because you will see we are going out of the Egypt. Usually I instruct those who participate in the Seder that we are not to touch, to eat, to smell, to do anything unless you're instructed to do so. Why? Because we need to do the things in order. And if you will eat or touch something not at the appropriate moment, you will break the order. So we are not going to go out of Egypt. Everything has to be done step by step. Also, keep in mind that that we are doing something what is very ancient. Ancient, I mean, some elements like unleavened bread or the lamb or the bitter herbs are as ancient as the Exodus from Egypt. Because even in the book of Exodus, as God was leading us out of Egypt, he instructed us to take certain things and to eat them this night. And if the people will ask you, if your children, it's written there, will ask you, what is that? What are you doing? And why you are doing that for? What are you doing that for? So your answer would be, it's because God brought me out of Egypt. And it means that everything what we eat tonight, touch tonight, it's like a participating in the Exodus. Believe it or not, but in Jewish mindset, and it's pretty biblical, by doing what God said us to do, we participate in his plan. So by doing certain things in order, by eating, touching, and saying something, we participate in that Exodus. And keep in mind, just remember what I just said. Tell to your children, it's because God brought me out of Egypt. And it's said to teach the children like this from generation to generation. It means from generation to generation, every household leader or father is to tell to his children, I was going out of Egypt. It's not just for them. We participate in that Exodus. And if we will think of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah, celebrating the Passover meal with his disciples, he also said something for us to follow from generation to generation. Namely, by eating something, by drinking something, we participate in what Yeshua, Jesus, did for us back then. I think it's at least nice. It's something very good to have some elements for us to participate in something what God did for us in his redemptive plan. So with this in mind, let's go out of Egypt. And now I would encourage you to recline wherever you are. Just recline, sit comfortable. It's a tradition. You see, I wear a special robe that is white because I'm free and I'm in celebratory mood. And you see, it's just like it's very celebratory occasion because we came out of Egypt. But now, one step after another. So we are going to do it step by step. The candles are already lit, and usually the candles are lit by a woman. It's a story for itself why only women do that, but I don't have a woman with me right now. It's 1 a.m., so my wife already sleeps because we're celebrating worship service tomorrow and we need to be ready. But the candles are done, so let's go to the next step. There are 4 cups, and for the sake of the illustration, I took all 4 of them and put I put 4 cups for glasses here for you to see what I'm going to do. Usually it's 1 cup, sometimes like this, that is filled 4 times. But again, we're usually talking about 4 cups. And I have here 4 cups for you to see how it works. So, first cup is called the Cup of Sanctification. And this cup is here to separate this special day from all other days. So this day is holy. But at the same time, it reminds us that God made us as his people. He has chosen Jewish people. More than that, he has chosen Abraham and created us as the people from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Even in Egypt, he set us apart from everybody else. And he sanctified us. And that was the first step of our redemptive story. For a certain, in a certain way, we were made special in Egypt. And there is a special benediction. But for those of you who have some grape juice available on your table or in front of you, wherever you sit or recline today, I want to encourage you to fill this cup. You will need to drink it, so just fill as much as you want to drink. It's grape juice. So with wine, it would be more complicated, and I wouldn't do it with you because it's DTS Seder. And there is a special benediction. Well, special. It's an ancient benediction. As Jesus, Yeshua, during the Passover meal, reclined at the table with his disciples, as we read, for example, in Luke chapter 22. He took this. Took this cup. He gave thanks. And usually, when Jewish people drink wine or the fruit of wine, in our case, in your case, grape juice, there is a special benediction that most probably, 99% probability, if not more, Yeshua, Jesus, said as well. And in Hebrew, it's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, the creator of the fruit of the vine. And now I encourage you, I invite you to drink this. Now this is, the next step is washing of hands, and it's done by leader only. I'm going to skip on that, on doing that at the moment. But let me illustrate something from the Bible. If you remember, at a certain moment of the Passover celebration, Yeshua stood up and washed the feet of his disciples. Peter was sort of like shocked by Yeshua doing this, and he didn't want at first. And Yeshua was showing an example of sacrificial servanthood, like demonstrating the reason he came. But it was not part of the order. Probably at that very moment, actually, Yeshua had to wash his hands himself. Well, I cannot say it for 100% sure, but Yeshua broke some tradition of that time, definitely, because we see the reaction of Peter. And washing of hands, it's an ancient Jewish tradition that is even coming to us from the second or even from the first temple period, and is described even in the Bible. Anyway, the next what I want to do, I want to read you a passage from Luke, from the Gospel of Luke, just introducing Yeshua's celebration. In Luke chapter 22, from verse 14. And when the hour had come, he reclined at table, and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I shall never again eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. It's interesting. So Yeshua was going to eat the Passover with his disciples. It was his desire. And Passover, it was, and it is the name actually of the Passover lamb. In Hebrew, Pesach, it's not just the feast, it's also the name for the lamb. So he was going to eat this lamb, and he said, and I read it again, I shall never again eat it, not period, but until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. With other words, Yeshua is going to eat this, to eat the Passover sacrifice, Passover lamb, and celebrate the Passover meal with his disciples in the future when he will come back. So what we're doing right now, it's not just remembering what was done thousands of years ago as God was leading Jewish people out of Egypt, but we also celebrate what Yeshua did for us 2,000 years ago, and in a foreshadow of what's going to happen later when Yeshua will come back. So in the future, with other words, we are going to celebrate the Passover meal, but I'm not going to lead it for you, and other rabbis will not do it. But Yeshua himself is going to explain to us everything and tell us the story that saves us, or the story how he saved us. And then in verse 17, and having taken a cup, when he had given thanks, he said, take this and share it among yourselves. That was probably the first cup that we just took with you. And verse 18 says, for I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine from now on until the kingdom of God comes. Again, there is a Passover celebration in the future that is expecting us as guests if we follow Yeshua, and we anticipate to participate, hopefully. Well, next step is karpas, and usually, if we would sit together, and you will, and all of us would participate, and I could hear what you respond. Actually, it's to be honest, it's the first time I do the Passover Seder or this presentation without anybody, just to interact with. It's very interactive thing. But I would probably ask you, what is that? And you and many of you would answer, it's a parsley. And I would say, no, not really, because tonight everything what we have on this table has a different meaning. It's a magic night, with other words. It's the night when everything is changing its meaning on the table in order to tell us the story and in order to bring us out of Egypt. So tonight, it's not a parsley, but it's a hyssop that we use to place the blood of the lamb on doorposts. Also, it can celebrate, it can demonstrate the green of the new life, like a spring. And there is something what usually is salt water, but tonight it's the water of the Red Sea that we crossed as we went out of Egypt. And another tradition would explain it as the tears that we had in Egypt because our life was bad and bitter. So if you have it on your table, dip the hyssop in the water of the Dead Sea or the spring or new life in the tears of the old life, and then try it. Now, there is a special bag on my table. And this bag, it's like one bag, but with 3 different compartments, like 3 pockets. And in each pocket, there is a piece of matzah. It's called matzah-tash. Matzah-tash, it's not a Hebrew word, it's an Yiddish word. So it's like German-like sounding language that European Jews were speaking, so-called Ashkenazi Jews. And matzah-tash, the translation would be matzah bag. So very simple. But why 3 compartments? The Jewish tradition explains it in several different ways. One of them is it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3 patriarchs, but they all together are one root of Israel. Or another tradition says it's like priests, or Kohanim, Levites, and the simple Israelites. And all together are the nation of Israel. So it's like unity in diversity. So there are like 3, but 1. 3 compartments, one bag. And interestingly, at this very moment of this Passover Seder, as we know today, the middle piece of matzah, exactly middle piece of matzah, is broken in half, and one piece of this that is broken off is hidden, and with other words, it's like buried. So it's buried and it's hidden somewhere, like in a grave, for children to be looking for this piece of matzah, finding, taking it, and after the meal, we will need this piece of matzah bag, and the children will get some presents in order to give this piece of matzah bag. So the Jewish tradition sometimes says it's to entertain the children. Well, so far so good. But we will come back to this piece of matzah later. But I would go ahead even now and tell that this piece of this bag, matzah tash, is a very good illustration of our God, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God who is in the middle. son who was broken, son who was buried, and who is going to come back. So, but that's, I will leave it for later. Sorry. Okay. So next is to tell the story, and there are 4 questions that usually are asked. A child is asking these questions, and the questions are like this. It's to help to tell the story. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat either leavened or unleavened bread. Why on this night do we eat only matzah, unleavened bread? It was first. Second, on all nights we eat vegetables and herbs of all kinds. Why on this night do we eat only bitter herbs? Third question, on all nights we never think of dipping herbs in water or in anything else. Why on this night do we dip the parsley in salt water and the bitter herbs in haroset? And the fourth question, on all nights we eat either sitting upright or reclining. Why on this night do we all recline? And this this is the time to explain that and to tell the story as response to these questions. So let me explain you something. We were slaves, and our life was bitter. And Pharaoh was our master. He could do with us whatever he pleased. He could kill us. In fact, he killed our children. He gave us slavery work and slavery, like slave labor. And that's, so our life was bitter. That's actually why we have bitter herbs. But as our life was so bitter and so hard, we cry out to God. Actually, to be honest, I'm not sure that we cried out to God. It's just written in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, that we cried out just like, oh, Gewalt, it's so bad. Our life is so bitter. And you know what? Whoever we cried to, or it was just at night to the wall, cried to the wall, whatever, God heard our crying. He heard our suffering. He noticed that, he knew that, and he came to rescue us. He has chosen Moses to send Moses to tell the Pharaoh one very famous sentence: let my people go. Usually, this saying, this phrase is so famous that nobody even notices what is following. And everybody says, let my people go, period, or like exclamation mark. It's not the full sentence yet, though. The full sentence is, or continued by, for them to serve me or to worship me or to do work for me, with other words, in the desert. So in fact, it was like a desire to change the master. Pharaoh was the master of Jewish people and they were working for him. He was like God for them. But then the God of Israel, he sent Moses to tell that there is another God, the true God, and he is the master of the Jewish people. So they need to go and worship and work for him in the desert. Well, you remember probably the story. Moses came to Pharaoh, told that, and Pharaoh said, well, who is this God? I don't know him. I don't care about him. Let my people go, said God. It's his people? No, forget about it. They are my people, probably thought Pharaoh. And he explicitly behaved this way. God said, my people. Pharaoh said, no, they are mine. And it took 10 plagues for the Pharaoh to be finally convinced it's better to send Jewish people out. But you remember, we will name all the plagues, but the last one, do you remember what was the last one? Slaying of the firstborn. And slaying of the firstborn was a very huge tragedy, because in whole Egypt, in every house, somebody was dead. It was worse than any coronavirus or anything what people could experience in the history. Just every firstborn died. But what convinced Pharaoh the most, actually, and the miracle of that night, was not to kill. Pharaoh could also kill. But the thing is, the main miracle was that God could save. Do you remember what God told us in Egypt? Take a lamb, like 1 year old, and kill this lamb, take its blood, and mark your doors with this blood. And when the death is coming, I will see the blood, and the death will pass over. That's why Pesach, Passover. So the death was not going to come in. So everywhere in all Egypt, there were many dead people, tragedy. But in Jewish houses, with the sign of the blood, nobody died. So Pharaoh could kill, but Pharaoh could not save his people. With the God of Israel, it was a different story. He could protect his people. He is the life-giving God and not just the death-bringing one. So Pharaoh was convinced and sent our people out. He sent us out of Egypt. So the lamb. Why do we eat lamb? Because it was the final and the most important mean of our redemption. And as we went out of Egypt, we were in haste, so we didn't have even time for the bread to be mixed with yeast and just to take it nicely with us. So we went in haste, and we took just flour. And in the desert, we made like a very simple bread without any yeast, matzah, unleavened bread. And sometimes leaven means, or yeast means something what you took from a previous bread in order to make this bread like nice and big. But it's like from one bread to another. Unleavened bread, matzah, is like completely new one. And as we went out of Egypt, we got absolutely new life. Not just we changed the masters, but or changed geographic location. We got absolutely new life, the quality new life with the God of Israel. And that's why we eat unleavened bread that demonstrate the new life that is clean of what used to be previously. Now let's now fill the second cup. The second cup is affiliated with the Exodus from Egypt. It's called also the cup of judgments or the cup of plagues. And do you remember what was the first cup? That one? Sanctification. God separated us from all other people. We are his chosen people in order the next step, in order to bring us out of Egypt with great judgments by great miracles. We rejoice tonight. We are free, but we're also sorry that the Egyptians got to suffer such tremendous and horrible consequences because of the Pharaoh's stubbornness. And now we are going to name all the plagues just to remember the miracles of God. And at the same time, we are going to take a little bit out of our joy. So we will reduce our joy, and wine is the symbol of joy. We're going to reduce the amount of joy because we have compassion. We are sorry for Egyptians. So if you would just name the plagues, the judgments with me, and every time you do it, just take a little bit of a little bit of the joy or grape juice out of your cup. You can also just pour it out on a plate or whatever is appropriate. So first, blood. Just follow me and repeat after me. Frogs, lice, fleas, cattle, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, death of firstborn, now this second cup, we partake in this cup because we are all together going out of Egypt right now. So the same benediction. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'agafen. Amen. Now it's the time for everybody to wash his or her hands. Again, we are probably going to skip on that for the sake of the presentation and time and efforts. But it's not washing hands for our hands to be clean, like of germs or viruses, but more it should be done before coming to the table. But it's like ritually making our hands ritually clean because we are going to touch like holy, special, even I would say sacramental things. If you would just without referring that to Catholic Church. It's not the sacraments like that, but still it has a very sacramental meaning tonight. So now we're going to try a little bit of matzah. So if you would take a little piece of matzah, usually like size of an olive, and we are going to participate in the new life that he has given us by doing that. And there is a benediction that Yeshua used to say every time coming before eating bread or eating something with bread present. If you remember in the gospel, he broke the bread and he thanked and he broke it. We know what he said. Most probably, it was Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who lets bread grow forth from the earth. And now let's eat it. Here I have some bitter life. It's like in this case it's cut horseradish and onion. It's most probably bitter, and we dip it in haroset. It's a sweet mixture. You see, it's brown. It's like it symbolizes mortar that we were using for construction, so building bricks in Egypt. But at the same time, it's sweet. It's like honey, apples, raisins, almonds. So it's a very nice, actually very healthy mixture if you are not allergic to anything in this mixture. And it's very sweet. So bitter life and sweet, we take it both together, because as our life was very bitter, there was a sweet hope that God was going to rescue us, as He did. Let's try it. Yeah, it is bitter. I don't know about you, but mine is very bitter. It should be like this, but haroset is so sweet and so good. Now, well, I'm missing seeing your reaction on that. It's usually if we sit together and eat it, it's the best time to take pictures, actually, because if horseradish is the life is really bitter, there is such a mimic on faces of everybody, and it's very funny moment. Anyway, now it's the time to eat a sandwich made of 2 pieces of matzah. So 2 little pieces of matzah with something in between, so like sandwich. But what is in between? Another type of a bitter life. It's chopped horseradish. So you do a sandwich. You take some of this horseradish and you put it between these 2 pieces of matzah. Again, it's chopped horseradish between these 2 pieces of matzah, and you just eat it. Do you see the difference between old life, bitter life, and new life? Well, now it's the time for a dinner. In Hebrew, it's called shulchan arech, or covered tables, or table with food. Again, I'm very sorry. Due to the circumstances, we were not able to do it today or tonight in Dallas in the Lamb Auditorium. Sorry. Maybe next year. If not in Jerusalem, then hopefully in Dallas, Dallas Theological Seminary in Lamb or whatever. I'm missing the food that should be there. Anyway, by God's grace, these strange times will be over hopefully soon. We will get together again. We will eat together. Anyway, But even if I can't resist to say it, but if Yeshua will come back and take us sooner, then we will eat Passover with him. We have nothing to lose, actually. There is a great dinner, Passover dinner waiting for us in his kingdom. Anyway, let's assume we ate. And now it's the time for this piece of matzah that was broken, buried, and hidden to come back on the table. And now this piece of matzah has a very, very strange name. It's called Afikoman. And Jewish tradition sometimes translates this word by saying it's a dessert. So if you ask some Jewish people, what does Afikoman mean? They would say, it's a dessert. Why is it dessert? Because they would say it's the last part of the meal. Nothing, we cannot eat anything after we eat Afikoman. So it's like the last what you eat tonight, the last thing. And the taste of this Afikoman is to remain in your mouth till next morning. So it's the very, very, very last thing. That's why it's dessert. Well, I would say it's probably not a Hebrew word. It's a Greek word, and it comes from Afikoman. And for you who are good Greek students, you know, it's just like I came. It's a strange name. Jewish Passover Seder, a piece of matzah, so important, very prominent piece of matzah with a Greek name. And translation is I came. Weird, strange. And particularly it's strange because there is a very strong resemblance between this piece of matzah and the Passover lamb. The Passover lamb is, the Jewish tradition tells about the Passover lamb the following saying. The Passover lamb is the last what you eat tonight. The Passover lamb, the taste of the Passover lamb is to stay in your mouth till next morning, and nothing, you cannot eat anything after you're done with the lamb. So you see, it's the same. It's like exact matching between this piece of matzah and the lamb. Now, interestingly, for those of you, you probably read the New Testament, right? You know the story. As Yeshua was eating with his disciples during the meal, he took the bread and he said, he broke it. He said blessing. He broke it. He gave it to his disciples. He said, "Take it, eat it. It's my body that is broken for you, and do that in remembrance of me." And the Apostle Paul said, "Do it till he comes back again." So in foreshadow and in anticipation of the future. Now. Some scholars think that as the temple was destroyed and the Jewish people were not able to bring a Passover sacrifice any longer, they were looking for a substitute for the Passover sacrifice. At the very same time, in the 1st century AD, Jewish followers of Jesus, they used to be part of Jewish community. The separation between, let's say, quote unquote, church and Jewish community was not so strong at that time. And the Jewish believers, the Jewish followers of Jesus, they remained a part of the Jewish community. So they were celebrating Seder, Passover meal, and they were talking about this piece of matzah. Listen, it's like with holes in it. It's like burned. It's a bread of suffering. So our Messiah, he suffered. We have the Lamb of God that takes the sin. Isaiah 53. That's what is where we read about this. And in the New Testament, so the Jewish followers of Yeshua, they were taking this bread as their Messiah told them to do, and they were celebrating something like also like Exodus, redemption, new life, cleanness from sin, but just because, not just the Passover lamb, but somebody who gave this bread as his body. So do it, it's my body. And the Jewish community observed that. And as the rabbis or sages of back then, they were trying to find a substitute. They just probably adopted, very probably adopted this piece of matzah. And if it's true, and I do believe it is, then Yeshua is on every Passover table today, even tonight. Can you imagine? Just wherever Jewish people celebrate Passover, there is a piece of matzah with strange name, I came, and Yeshua, Jesus is there on every Passover table, part of the Jewish story actually. What is necessary, what is missing to acknowledge, to recognize, to see. And please, I would encourage you, this Passover season, pray for the Jewish people to get an open eyes and open hearts to see Yeshua, even during the Passover celebration, even in this piece of matzah, even in the Exodus story, in the story of the redemption of the Jewish people, and in the story of redemption of the whole world. And now, if you would, let's break this piece of matzah. And I'm not used to virtual Lord's Supper yet. But because we just said what Yeshua said, and because we are now at the time of the Passover celebration, as Jesus did it, so I would encourage you to eat this matzah, or a piece of Afikoman, remembering what Jesus did for us. God's redemption, forgiveness of sin. He is the perfect sacrifice. We have a new life because of him. Let's eat it. And that's without any benediction. Now it's the time for the third cup. The third cup is called the cup of redemption, but also this is the cup of that is related to the covenant. Just follow this story with me. What was the first cup? It was God, the cup of sanctification. God sanctified us. He took us as his people, as his chosen people. We were made different. We were different in Egypt, different, sanctified people. Why? What for? In order, second cup, to lead us out of Egypt by great judgments and great miracles. What was the next destination for us to come to? The next major step. You should remember, I'm sure you know, the Mount of Sinai, the covenant. He brought us there. He gave us the Torah. He gave us the commandments. That's the place where we promised him that we are going to do what he commands us. And he was speaking to Moses. He was speaking to us through Moses. And we acknowledge this covenant. And he cut the covenant with us. A great covenant. The covenant that was unprecedented, with the law that was unprecedented at that time. This cup represents the next step of the redemption. Going out of Egypt, we became his people by entering his covenant with us. There was a problem with this covenant, if you remember. Do you remember the problem? What is written in Jeremiah chapter 31. Let me read it for you quickly. Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 and following. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach again each man his neighbor, and each man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more. What we see in this passage is the covenant that was cut at the Mount of Sinai as God was leading us out of Egypt. That covenant was broken. God was faithful, we were unfaithful. The covenant was broken, but there is a promise that God will restore it. He will make the new covenant, the covenant that is based on the forgiveness of sin. And the forgiveness of sin will grant people a possibility to know God face to face and to be with him and to live with him for the house of Israel, for the house of Judah, and as we know from the later history, for everybody who wants to enter this covenant. So, as Yeshua was celebrating the Passover, his last Passover meal on this earth before he comes back, he said to his disciples, he took the cup, and it's explicitly written, the cup after they have eaten, the cup after the meal. So the Afikoman was last part of the meal. Now this is the cup after the meal. I would say it looks like the same cup. So the third cup in our order. He took this cup and he said, drink it. He gave thanks and he said, drink it. This is the new covenant in my blood. Just new covenant. Forgiveness of sin in his blood. It's what we were reading in Jeremiah 31. And again, we do it in order to remember him, to remember this perfect and absolute redemption, new covenant, forgiveness of sin, a possibility to live with God, to know him, and to dwell with him forever. And that's why we are grateful, we are thankful for what Yeshua, Jesus, did for us. We celebrate Exodus from Egypt, but also we celebrate a great redemption for Jews and Gentiles that was done in Yeshua and by his blood. And with this in mind, let me say the benediction, and we will drink this cup. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, the one who creates the fruit of the vine. Let's drink it. Now, there is a special place or a seat here, and there is a cup and there is a plate, and this is for Elijah. The Elijah, the prophet that we expect will come and announce that the Messiah is approaching. The Jewish tradition says that the Messiah will be announced or proclaimed, and even, why not, come during the Passover season. And that's why there is a Jewish tradition. We always leave an empty chair for him, and the cup and the plate. So we prepare a seat for him. And then the children are sent to the entrance door to cry out, Elijah, Elijah. They call for Elijah to come with hope that our redemption is coming even tonight. Or our Redeemer, our Messiah, better say this way. Sometimes I'm asked if I believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, and John the Baptist fulfilled the ministry of Elijah. Why do I have this chair now as a messianic believer? Oh, it's very simple. Listen, I'm expecting that Yeshua is coming back, and his coming back will be announced also in tremendous way, and it's what I do in order to show that I anticipate, I'm longing for his coming back, his return. Well, maybe even tonight, maybe during the Passover. Why not? It would be sort of natural. However, Elijah, tonight he is not coming, evidently. Although I said pretty loud his name. Now it's the time for the fourth cup, and this is actually the chair of Elijah, and the fourth cup are pretty much related to each other or connected to each other. Now, do you remember what was the first cup for? It's sanctification. God sanctified us in order to the cup of judgments, in order to lead us out of Egypt with great miracles. In order, the cup of redemption, in order to make a covenant with us and make us as a people, his covenantal people. What was the next and final actually stop or destination for the Jewish people, for the Israelites at that time? Do you remember what should it be? The promised land. He was leading us all the way to the promised land. Did we make it there? Not in the first generation. Only a couple people did, but the first generation stayed in the desert. And even as Yehoshua ben Nun brought us as people into the promised land, we never could have the entire land. We never could live in peace. We never experienced there what God was promising us or willing us to experience. Why? You remember the third cup? The covenant was broken. We were disobedient. And that's why this cup is still like the cup of anticipation. And that's why there is a chair of Elijah. Usually this time with the fourth cup, Jewish people sing psalms of praise, so-called the psalms of Hallel, psalms from 113 through 118. Do you remember Yeshua with his disciples were singing and going to the Mount of Olives in the gospel? We know exactly what they were singing. These psalms, the psalms of Hallel. Why? Because these are the psalms of ascension. This is the messianic psalms. We're going up to Jerusalem, to the temple to worship the king. And according to the prophet Zechariah and other prophets, we are going to Jerusalem and we are going to worship the king there. So this is still anticipating. Do you remember, by the way, do you remember what Jesus said? You are not going to see me until you will say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. That's also the phrase from these psalms. So these psalms are like inviting the Messiah to come, inviting him to come and to lead us into his kingdom. And that's why Yeshua said, I'm going to drink it with you when I will come back. So this is the cup of anticipation. It's called traditionally the cup of praise, but for us it's the cup that demonstrates our anticipation for the Messiah to come, and in our case for Yeshua to return, to come back to us and to establish his kingdom on this earth. And in this moment, that's what Paul was also meant. You do it till he returns. Now, if you want to drink, and it's usually what I say to everybody, if you want to drink this cup, and I hopefully you do, then you need to keep something in mind. This is the fourth cup. If you want to be in his kingdom, if you want to celebrate with him, if you want to live in the place, no diseases, no viruses, no infections, no suffering, no struggles, if you want to live with him forever in his light and the perfection of his knowledge and surrounded by his perfect infinite love, this is the fourth cup. There is no possibility to get to the fourth cup without the third one, without the cup of the covenant, without Jesus shedding his blood for us, without us drinking, or just with other words, associating with his sacrifice, without accepting his sacrifice for us, there is no chance. Seder means order. There is no chance for us to enter his kingdom. So simple it is. But I hope that all of us, all of you, are in better shape. We are his people. He has chosen us and he led us out of sin and misery of our life, where our masters were flesh and Satan. He made a new covenant with us by the blood of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, and he leads us in the new Jerusalem. And that's why let's drink it in anticipation of this kingdom to arrive. Now, as I told you previously, there is a saying at the end: blessed is the one who fulfills all the steps of the Passover Seder, of the Passover order. I congratulate you. You did it. If you stayed with me all throughout all these steps, we made it together. We are free people tonight, but we are still waiting for something even better. And that's why at the end of the ceremony, at the end of the Seder, Jewish people say, Leshana haba Birushalayim, and they add, in Israel, they add Habnuya, next year in the new rebuilt Jerusalem. So if you want, try to say it with me. Leshana haba Birushalayim Habnuya, next year in the new rebuilt Jerusalem. Thank you for being with me tonight for this, I would say, miraculous evening of going out of Egypt. And with that in mind, with this all said, the Seder, the order is over.